Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. And I'm so excited today to be joined by coach, entrepreneur, fitness professional, all around great person, and my good friend, Bobby Cappuccio. So, welcome back to the podcast. You were on so long ago.
Hey, Karen. By the way, I like that last title you gave me better than all the rest of those.
Friend.
Yes.
Old friend. Yes. Okay, we can compose ourselves now. So obviously I know you, adore you, and a lot of people know you and adore you, but for those who don't, can you tell a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm Bobby Cappuccio. Well, we've covered that. And I think what I do is I give people the resources to give other people resources to be at their most resourceful in making the decisions that are critical for them to have what they truly want within the domain of wellness. And I define wellness as your self-determined sense of meaning, what you decide for your life, and then the optimization of the physical, emotional, and cognitive faculties, capacity to take that future vision, if you will, and bring it into your current reality. So I guess that's kind of like what I do.
Yeah, that's a big do for people. But now you've obviously not been this sort of inspirational figure your entire life. And if you're comfortable about talking about some of the things that happened in your life that has maybe led you to where you are now, I think the viewers would really appreciate that. So I'll just kind of hand it over to you and allow you to kind of tell your story a little bit, and we'll take it from there.
Well, one of the things that I've enjoyed most in my career, aside from being a communicator, coach, and a presenter, is training other presenters. You know, and it's kind of like Dr. Roy Sugarman. He's fond of a phrase, you're not the sage on the stage, you're the guide by the side. And I think one of the most valuable tools that a guide has is people have aspirations, but sometimes they have hesitation that meets aspiration, where I kind of want to go there, but I cannot really see myself going that distance or that direction. And what a good guide does is, well, they help you go just as far as you can see, because when you get to that point, you'll be able to see much further, obviously. And one of the things I think that has inspired the presenters that I've developed is the realization that if you could take a look and you knew me where I started, that should encourage you. That should make you feel very good about your chances of doing absolutely anything. When I first got started in my career, I was lost. Not that I had no idea what I was passionate about or what I was interested in. I started getting an idea, but I didn't know which direction to go because of certain beliefs. I was basically fighting with the police department. I wanted to be part of the NYPD, and I just wanted to be part of Special Victims. And this is before even like Law and Order came out. I wanted to do that because it was personally meaningful to me. But they were like, oh, we're not really sure. You've got this Tourette's thing, and like you can't have somebody like with Tourette's and a gun. Because I think there's one political movement in this country that says guns don't kill people, people kill people. But I think you could also say guns don't kill people, like people kill people, especially if they have Tourette's. That's like a bad situation. So you don't give that person a gun. And so I was contesting this, and I stumbled into the fitness industry accidentally. Because for me, it was at first just working out. I was born severely deformed. I was deformed in my legs, and my face was disfigured. And a lot of people watching this right now, they're looking at my face and they're saying, what? No way, it was worse than that. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. But yeah, it was. And I was adopted. And the person who adopted me, she was developmentally disabled. And that's the truth of it. And her husband at the time, he had cancer. And he just wanted to go through the adoption process because, let's be honest, nobody was lining up to adopt me. So he's like, if we don't adopt this kid, he's going to stay in foster care. And I was already very sick in foster care as an infant from complete and total neglect. Like they just like left me there. I don't know if that had anything to do with my physical appearance, but I know sometimes people who look different are treated different. And I don't know what the reason, but they adopted me. Straight after you adopted me, he passed away. So you had this woman who's developmentally disabled, jobless, and now she's a single mother. That's a tough situation to be in. And she kind of like had me for 3 years and then met this guy. And that's where my life changed. He was, in every definition, a raging psychopath. So I grew up under very severe abuse. And I'm not just talking about physical abuse and punishment, but torture. I'm not going to get into details. There's certain things I'm going to say and allude to, but not say, because there's a point at which I could get too explicit and it's no longer useful for anybody who's listening to this. So I was tortured severely, as well as physically abused, emotionally tortured, and just, you know, around people who, well, someone who used my body however they wanted to. You can take whatever you want from that. And this was like 5 up until 9. And then around that period, I started to exhibit weird tics and weird behavior patterns. Looking back now, that seems like that's just me. So I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome at Mount Sinai Hospital, put on experimental medication, Haldol, which is not the drug you put a 9-year-old kid on. That's like a last resort antipsychotic med. So between that and the fact that I had about at least half a dozen concussions, according to the last neuroscientist who evaluated me just a couple of months ago, had brain damage. So Tourette's, brain damaged, and physically deformed, had big glasses. So not only was there a lot of violence in the home, I was a target for punishment. So went outside the home, tons of violence, and that led me to start to hang out with some very unsavory people. Kind of like, because I would take any group I belonged to. But the group I belonged to, they were a rough bunch and a very strange bunch at that. So I started developing a belief system very early in life that this is it. There's not much out there for me. Even though when I took the police test, I scored 103, I dismissed that. So anything that I did cognitively where you were like, oh, wow, hey, that was pretty good, I dismissed it and rationalized it. And anytime I struggled, well, I just ruminated on that and reinforced whatever belief system, was fed to me from parents, which wasn't a very encouraging environment. Obviously, it was a deadly environment. I mean, what I wanted to be when I grew up, I thought that if I could be alive by the time I grew up, that was a massive accomplishment. And then I started, working in security, and I started working in the gym business just for a part-time job. And I stumbled across somebody who saw something in me that nobody else saw. And this individual changed my life. As a matter of fact, I went and actually had dinner with this guy a couple of months ago. And I remembered what it was like to be around this guy, where I almost felt walking away from dinner, I wanted to be a better person. I mean, I wasn't a total asshole showing up, half an asshole, but walking away from dinner was like, oh my God, I could do better. This guy had such an impact. He had such expectation. I always wanted to rise to his expectations and never disappoint him. And when I met this guy, my entire life turned around.
And isn't it amazing how it takes just that one person, that one mentor, that one individual in this whole entire world that you were clearly meant to meet, that is going to give you the encouragement and the love and the mentorship that you needed. And you obviously met this person for a reason. It was the right time, the right place, the right person. And I think it's also kind of amazing that you're still in touch and that, you're still part of each other's lives. So do you feel like this person was meant to be in your life, even looking back on it now?
I don't know. I don't know whether or not people were meant to be in your life. You're meant to cross paths. And you know what? I don't think that that's the big issue. The big issue is not who's meant to be. The big issue is pay attention to what's actually occurring. You can attach whatever meaning you want to whatever's going on in the moment. You can tell yourself whatever story you want. And if you're really persuasive, you can even tell yourself a story about your story, so you don't even realize it's a story. And you think that thought so many times with so much intensity, it evolves into a belief, and that's just the way life is for you. And that's great if that works.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the ability to pay attention to what's happening and who's in your life and what they're bringing and what you have an opportunity to give in return is critical. Because, not everybody watching this has suffered through extreme trauma where every day it was like, okay, well, I'm going to be like held underwater, or I'm going to be suffocated today, or held out a window, or burned, where, some people have gone through that, where it's like every day, well, am I going to be sexually abused, raped today? And that's serious. But for some people, they went through, their parents got divorced, and their sense of reality, their identity, and their world got completely rocked. And I think, a lot of this stuff is relative. One of the things that I find so annoying is when someone's like, oh, well, you're complaining about this, but, other people have it worse. Mm-hmm. So if I'm married to the love of my life and I get divorced, well, I shouldn't feel bad about that at all because other people have never found love. That's not logical. I think that is a pain-based emotive reaction that creates a lot of bitterness in people because they don't know how to deal with their stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, pain is relative. So whatever you're going through, I think it's yours and it's valid. And whatever emotions it evokes, I don't believe in positive and negative emotions. That's the story. Every emotion we have biologically, if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have evolved to this day and age. We wouldn't be here. It's all valuable. I think the matter is, what do you do with it? Now I'm here. Now what gets done? And I think the point I'm trying to make, long-winded, is everybody who's gone through something, what gets them out of it is not necessarily pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps, but interacting and formulating and cultivating continually effective relationships. There's no such thing as a self-made man or woman. No matter how much we celebrate them, it is mythological in the sense that they don't exist. Because if you look at the periphery of people's lives, someone always shows up. As a matter of fact, the most important thing you could be in anyone's story is never their hero. Let them be the hero. Like if you read Joseph Campbell's,
just talked about it today, The Hero's Journey.
That was such a great transcript. And even if you've not read Campbell, if you've seen anything in cinema, like Lord of the Rings, or Star Wars, the perfect mythological film, it's not the hero who's the most important. It wasn't Frodo who was the critical element. It was Gandalf. It was the guide. So the best thing anyone could ever be for you, and the most benevolent thing you can ever be for anyone else, is not their hero, because that robs them from self-accountability they need to heal, but being like Roy says, the guide by the side, because if you take a look at any hero, what they have in common is, even though the quest was so compelling that it was stronger than their reason to stay where they were, they don't want to go. Heroes are usually reluctant heroes, and it's the guy that either inspires or compels or forces them out of their comfort zone. But very soon, what happens? They run into trouble that they can't handle because they're trying to do something they have never done before, which necessitates becoming someone they've never been before, but they're not yet that person. So allies and friends show up along the way, and eventually the challenges that they've got to surmount are too big, and they come to the abyss where they're looking right into it. And if you look into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares right back at you. And it's very terrifying. It's very confronting. And the only way you're getting across that abyss is if something dies. Either you die literally, sometimes the challenge is that big, or a part of your past, or a belief, or a part of you have to let go of.
Yeah.
And very often people don't do that. And it's the guide.
So hard.
Yeah.
It
who inspires you and who gives you that certainty. And once you cross that, you can never go back again. because now you are someone different. And in every story, the hero just doesn't come back better. The hero comes back more capable of contributing to the group from whence he or she came. So that's a long-winded answer on, I think everybody, the only way out is up, and the only way up is by getting a hand up from the right person at the right time.
Absolutely. And, the last 2 days I had spent in this 2-day event run here in New York City by a man named Chris Winfield. And he sort of is a guide, he brings people together, and he brings the right people together, and kind of knows, he's one of these people who's a little intuitive and just kind of knows maybe who you should meet, or just exactly that little, like you said, little kick in the ass that maybe you need to get you over that abyss, or to at least get you to look into it a little bit deeper and try and let go of some of your insecurities. And so for me, he's been sort of that guide. And, one of my biggest issues is, and you've known me for a very long time, so this should come as no big surprise to you, but one of my biggest issues is always kind of believing in myself and seeing myself the way other people see me. And I remember I met with Chris, and he was like, before the new year, he was like, it is high time that you start seeing yourself the way other people see you. Because if you don't, then you're never going to move beyond where you are, and you're never going to take the responsibility of sharing all of this great information that you have with other people, because your job is to guide them. And I never really thought of it that way. I always thought of it more like, well, who's going to want to listen to me?
Can I tell a Karen Litzy story,
Yeah,
please?
yeah, please.
Because
as long as it's not a bad one.
No, it's not for you. It's not. But anyway, because what I find fascinating and I think personal as well. Everybody has that stuff. Like the most fraudulent person in the world is the one who pretends or who has fallen for their own narrative where they think, I got my shit together.
Yeah.
Because here you are, honestly, one of the most brilliant ladies I have ever met in my life. Giving, really switched on, connected, you're actively contributing, building your community, and you feel this way because we all feel this way, because at some point in our life, something happened where we were explicitly or implicitly told, you're not enough. You will not suffice. And then we develop this strong suit, right? We create this character out of thin air that is going to allow us to never feel that way again. So either I'm going to be like really, really smart, or I'm going to be really, really tough, or I'm going to be really funny, or I'm going to be a total disaster. And that gives me a locus of control, because then at least people will pay attention to me, because otherwise I don't get noticed. So it's all this stuff. And I remember we went to a pub one night, right? On the Upper East Side. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know what night we walked in there. It was like, we just wanted a couple of pints. Yeah. So you remember this.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they're like, oh, so it's I think it was a Monday. Yeah, we were like in a pub on a Monday. Cool. And they're like,
that's what happens when you're in your 30s. You go to pubs in your on random nights.
I thought that's what happens during half hours. But anyway, so we're in this pub, like, it's trivia night. And we're like, yay. And so they broke into teams. And everybody was there with their friends, because the more people you have, the more bandwidth mentally you have. And it was just me and you. I'm like, oh, we can't get out of this. Let's be a team. Now, there were teams of 5, 10, 15 people. This is very important. And we're going through a whole night, and I am completely useless. I think I got one answer.
Nah.
No, I got one answer right. I had a lot of answers. They were all wrong. So I got one, maybe 2 answers right. I remember this. And then they were tallying it up. And our team came in third. We won third place. Now, we, or you rather, were competing against 10, 15 people that live for trivia night. You just rocked up accidentally. And just the random information you had in your head, you single-handedly took out 2/3 of the ball or more. And this is the person who feels this way, you know?
I know. And I'm getting better at not feeling that way, but it's difficult, you know. And I think when it comes to, you know, like you said earlier, part of what your kind of zone of genius is really helping people kind of stand up. And I know you work with people with public speaking and things like that. And I remember the first time, I think we even worked on public speaking, and I was like a disaster. Like, I was the worst at public speaking. I can say that wholeheartedly. Well, fast forward, I don't know how many years that it's been now. What, how, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years. I don't know how old, I don't know how old Liz's oldest child is, but you know, it's been a good number of years.
7.
Is he 7?
He's my godson. I better know that.
Yeah. So it's maybe been 8 years, right?
Yeah.
So I last year was the keynote speaker for a New York City physical therapy student conclave. And I went up and I gave my speech, and then people had questions afterwards. And one of the questions was, how do you, you know, kind of, how do you go up on stage and you're not nervous? And you're, and I just looked over, I was like, I'm sweating my ass off up here. Like, I could not be more nervous. Like, I can't believe I haven't passed out yet. Like, of course I'm nervous, you know?
It's not your distorted beliefs. It's distorted beliefs of people who see somebody doing something, but they haven't been there throughout that journey. They're not inside of your skin. They have no idea.
No idea. And
stories on both ends.
And I remember finishing the talk off with, you know, in this day and age of Facebook, and, you know, we have Facebook pages, you have like 5,000 people on your page. And so you look at this content that people put out, and it's always that highlight reel, right? No one puts up on Facebook like, oh, my boyfriend just broke up with me today, or I had a shitty date, or, you know, that's not up on Facebook. Or I treated 4 people this week and only one of them came back. 2 of them didn't get better. They decided to go somewhere else. It's always, I'm the best PT in the entire world, and my patients tell me I'm amazing. Or, you know, in your case, you know, I've coached all these people and they all love me, and look how wonderful I am.
I would never say that.
Well, you know, in reality, everybody puts on their highlight reel. And so I like to tell people that that's like kind of not what real life is like. You
And
know,
it's irrelevant.
Perfect. Yeah. And it's irrelevant, and nobody's perfect. And if you're trying to emulate someone who you think has this perfect life, like, think again, you know?
I mean, think about someone who is 30 years old, right? That's fairly young. And if you're a millennial watching this, yes, that's fairly young. But if you took a single snapshot, just a 1 second still of any moment in that person's entire life, they would look either like an absolute hero or an absolute villain. Yet it's kind of like the music between the notes. There's such an abundance in the space in between, and it all means nothing because it's none of your business or concern how talented you are. It's none of your business how you compare to anybody else. And it's none of your business what right you have to share your message or not, and whether or not people are going to receive that. Because in a lot of senses, these are things beyond your control, and these are things that take your focus and direct them to a very destructive place, which is inward, where all those stories and neuroses reside, rather than outward, where you're needed. The only thing that's your business, in the words of author Otto Scharmer, and he wrote the book Theory U, is to keep yourself open. Open mind, open heart, and open will. And if you start doing all of these comparisons, and you compare your fabricated snapshot moment in time, not me, but the person who I want to reveal to 5,000 people, 490 of which, like 1,990 of which couldn't care less, really. because they're too worried about their own snapshots to pay attention. And if you're getting caught up in that, you start to develop fear, judgment, mostly self-judgment, and cynicism. And judgment is the enemy of an open mind, and fear is the enemy of an open heart, and cynicism is the enemy of an open will. And then that channel that will connect with the right people. It's not about who accepts me, it's about resonance. And what I mean by resonance, if you were standing in a massive hotel room and it was empty and there were two grand pianos, one at one end and the other on the other end of the hall, and you went over to one grand piano and you just hit C note and you walk straight across to the other grand piano, C note on that other piano would be vibrating because there's resonance between those two pianos. And that's what I mean. You don't get to choose who resonates. All you're responsible for is doing what you do, doing what is personally meaningful, and doing it with reckless abandon and being completely invested in who you're doing it for and why you're doing it, but at the same time, being completely unattached from the outcome. That's power. And when you have power, you no longer need to go through your life utilizing force.
But that's so hard. Like, what advice? I mean, the comparison thing is difficult, okay? Let's be honest. We're all human, right? We're all going to look at something that someone else is doing and be like, oh, am I doing that? Or should I be doing this better if they're doing this? So what advice do you have specifically on the comparison to others? Because I do agree that it does cause judgment, mostly judgment of ourselves. And that judgment can obviously be very toxic and spiral us down into this depression, death spiral that nobody wants to be in. So, what's that?
Spiraling down into a depression, death spiral.
Yeah, it's the worst, right? So
it's a predicament. Yeah.
It is a predicament. So do you have any advice for people where if they start getting into that comparison mindset, how do we get out of it?
Okay, here's a couple of things. One, no, it's not easy, but nothing easy is sustainable because nothing easy is enjoyable. See, I think we get so confused with words, and it seems that when something is hard, it's going to be painful. And yes, there's elements of that. You know, if you're learning how to play tennis, I'm talking about tennis.
I am learning how to play tennis.
Really?
Yeah, I just started like a couple weeks ago.
I think I want to start, but every time I started, first of all, I was never that into it, and I was like so bad. I remember like every time I want to play tennis, people are like, no, play, you can't be that bad. And then when I do make contact with the ball, which is not often, it's gone. And they're like, all right, off the court. So yeah, but in tennis or anything, I'm just using this as a random example. When you are playing against someone who is so much worse than you, it's easy, but it's tedious, and that's painful. When you're playing against someone who's just a little bit better than you, is there difficulty there? Yes, there's difficulty there. Is there struggle there? Yes. But on the other end of that is complete and total focus and concentration and engagement, which are all required for a state of flow. And when you come out of that match, you realize after the fact that you were, even though you were struggling and you were challenged, it was exhilarating and you had a deep sense of enjoyment. Now, what's the difference between struggling and having enjoyment and struggling and being overcome by a sense of frustration? I think one is how much challenge you take on. If you're here and you take this on, well, that's not a good strategy. But if you keep yourself right underneath the lip of your current potential, that creates enjoyment through engagement. And I think so. One, don't think about how you view hard versus easy, and it's not synonymous with torture versus enjoyment. Second, I'm gonna like share the advice that I got from a good friend of mine and someone who I worked with, someone I have a lot of respect for, because I was talking about him earlier, and he was the CEO that I worked with, and he was a CEO that did not believe in mission statements per se. Now, could you imagine a CEO who doesn't believe in mission statements
I know
and
a few.
doesn't laminate anything? I mean, there's no phrases that people have to remember. There's no like laminated cards to keep in your wallet. You know, like don't you go to retreats and like read a book over the weekend? But he believed that a mission statement was kind of a game that people and companies play. And the reason for this, and I agree, is because mission statements always start off with a certain reference to I or we. And then we kind of try to weave other people into it to get them on board and inspired. But the purpose of this company is that we, or our company, our mission, and it's all about us. Where he believed that was something that was a lot more visceral and externally focused, which is a critical element of transcending anything, I believe, was something called an originating intention. Originating intentions start out quite antithetical to mission statements. They start out with you, because the person who is living immersed in their originating intention is completely focused outside of himself or herself on the person that they are serving. So that you is a universal you to every you that you come in contact with, if that still makes sense.
Yes.
And he was once asked, well, what is your personal definition of an originating intention? Is it just simply the meaning you have for your life? He said, no, it goes deeper than that. It is on a deep, visceral, almost like spiritual level, what you hold most sacred in your life. And you hold this so sacred. And here's how you can tell the difference between a marketing statement disguised as a mission statement and something that's really sacred. You want it for everybody. You don't just want it from people who buy from you or are in your family. You don't want it for people who look like you, think like you, belong to the same political party as you, live in the same area as you. You want this universally for everybody in the world because it has so touched your life. And I think everybody had, because if you ask somebody, well, what's the meaning of your life? I had a group I was speaking to in San Diego a couple of weeks ago. So I was like, I didn't find my passion yet. Is there anything wrong with me? No, nothing's wrong with you. The only thing that's wrong with you is you have all these self-help gurus going around saying, well, there's something wrong with you if you don't know what your passion is. You got to find your passion and live it. You know what? Screw that. Why don't you find your curiosity? We might not know what our passion is, but we all have curiosities. I mean, well, some of us know. Some people die at age like 25. They just don't get around to being buried until like 85. They've lost their curiosity, but most people have curiosities, and most people have things that are sacred to them. And start there. And if it's affected you, what would it be like if you were that catalyst, that filter through which that experience flowed through so other people can have what you have? And I think when you get there, you don't become the centerpiece, and you could really step over to the side and take on the role of the guide. And then you can ask yourself, well, because you're living either that originating intention or you're living in the void of it. So there's you who's the best version of yourself, who's that originating intention. And then there's this void over here. Because your originating intention, it's the real you. So when you're not that, which is your true self, what's left is a void. And the void gets into some very destructive behaviors. The void does things and says things where you're like, why do I do this? I have all this power, yet I behave like this in spite of my power. The void is the person who gets into your head. It's like, oh my God, like I doubt myself. Should I really be doing this? And a lot of times there's no alternative. So when you're really clear on the originating intention, you can step out in micro dosages, easy for me to say. You work in the medical field, and it's like, well, should I take this? Is this good or bad? Well, define good or bad for what reason? And it's about dose response. If I don't take enough, it's not efficacious. If I take too much, well, what was good for me is now very harmful for me. So how can I not step on the grand stage of the world, not how do I have as many Facebook followers as Gary Vee, how do I, with one person today, the person most proximal to me, the person who is most meaningful to me, how do I help them experience what I find most sacred? And you see people like this all the time. The newly converted, the person who smoked for 20 years, and everybody told them, you got to quit smoking, and they resisted and resisted, right? Because what gets insisted gets resisted. And then through their own autonomy, they had an event or a realization come into their life, like, I'm going to quit smoking. A year later, they have never felt better. And that is sacred. And they feel like, I'm going to be around maybe for my kids. And they go out and they evangelize, telling everyone not to smoke. Like, they even tell fitness people who've never picked up a cigarette not to. It's like, okay, I get it. Like, oh my God, I have so much energy. It's like, well, because you're kind of draining it from everybody else. Like, we know. But that's what having an originating intention does for you. It's no longer about you, and it's one person at a time.
And so if someone were to say or verbalize what their original or their
Originating intention.
originating intention is, like, do you have an originating intention, and can you verbalize that? Like, can you give an example? Because I know people are going to be like, well, do you have an example of that?
Yes, I do have an example. My originating intention, and it has evolved and shifted over time, is that you can live your truth and be free to play. And it's very succinct because it starts with you, because it's not about me. It takes my focus out of my head and directs me to the person right in front of me, whoever that might be in whatever number. And I believe that there is a truth that you know. And we're told constantly, well, you're not enough, or you're doing it wrong. Or you go on social media and said, you want it? Get off your ass and work for it. And that's the meme. I look at those and I say, wow, how does the world occur to that person? Who are people for the person who wrote that? And who do they think they are in comparison? Because obviously they possess the attributes that this unnamed person lacks. I'm like, that's self-flattery. That is complete self-flattery disguised as self-help. And self-flattery is never rooted in self-assurance. That's a very insecure, inadequate feeling person who wrote that. And it's not encouraging. So get off of that. It's about the person in front of you. And it also deals with, you don't have to live by anyone else's values. Because one, if you try to subject your highest priority, what is most meaningful, to a lower level value, a supporting value, and that supporting value has to come at the expense of what matters most, you're going to engage in a lifelong battle against yourself. And that is a battle you will always lose. And along the way, you're going to feel, what's wrong with me? Why am I so broken? And you're not broken. And because you're not broken, you don't need fixing. You just need to get really clear and really honest about what you value, what is your truth, and live that. Because when behaviors and values align, that's when passion, discipline, willpower, perseverance, all the attributes we associate with success occur automatically. You don't have to motivate someone to go on their dream vacation, even though there's a lot of money, a lot of work, and a lot of planning involved in that. You don't have to motivate someone to wake up the 5th time in a night when 4 times before their newborn woke up screaming and crying. They're not having fun. That's not a point where they're interacting with that baby in play, but they still wake up and they still minister to that baby. They have unrelenting discipline and perseverance and an emotional and energetic reserve, even in times of suffering, because of the meaning that baby represents, the value that baby supports. They are aligned. So what people lack is not discipline, willpower, character, or strength. What people lack is alignment. And that alignment is the precursor to decision. And once you live your truth, then you're free to play. People like, play, that's frivolous. No, play is the medium of intellect that channels creativity in a way that created the technology that allowed us to talk to each other and all of you. Play is the medium that when I go to speak, you know, the next place I'm going to go speak is San Diego, then Vietnam. How am I going to get there? Through mediums of play, okay? Because somebody had to engage in adult play long enough to create an airplane. Somebody had to create that train. So everything that we enjoy in the modern world is a result of an adult playing and putting foundations under play and channels for which to direct play. And not only are you most productive in those moments, but I believe you're most happy in those moments, because the pursuit of happiness only makes it more elusive. Nobody who pursues happiness ever catches up with it. I think Viktor Frankl says in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that, you know, success like happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue as an unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. And that's it. You know, you don't chase happiness, you attract it. And so for me, you can live your truth and be free to play is the highest intention I could ever hold for someone. And do you see how there's no conditions there? Mm-hmm. It's not you can live your truth and be free to play if you get your ass off the couch, if you're disciplined, and if you deserve it.
There's a caveat to that.
Yeah, there's no caveat.
Yeah.
It's something that you want without condition and without limit. Whoever comes within my circle of influence, I want that.
And I think that's lovely, and I think it's powerful. And now you have me sitting here thinking, well, gosh, what's my originating intention? And I need to think on that and figure out how I can incorporate that into what I do on a daily basis and my thinking on a daily basis, because then I think it will only help me when it comes to treating patients and to interacting with friends and, you know, colleagues and family and everything else. So I think what I would like to see, and what my call to action is for all the listeners, is to think about what your originating intention might be. And then I know I would love to hear what they are. I'm sure Bobby would love
I would love to hear that, because if people want to hear it, you're more likely to engage in it.
Yeah.
So I would love to see what comes out of this.
Yeah, me too.
One shift I would make in that is don't think about it. Feel it. This is where it doesn't matter what you think. Because thinking
I'm a
is
thinker, Bobby. You know I'm an overthinker.
That's why it's critical you don't think about this, because when I first started learning to do this and I wrote my originating intention, it was about all this stuff. And then my coach, he is very talented. He looked at me in a room full of people, like, that's not it. It's like, what do you mean it's not it? He's like, you ready for your originating intention? You can be free to play. I was like, no, that's not it. I was like, it hit me. You know, when it was like, that's it. And he's like, that is completely who you are. So don't tell me a story. I was like, how did you know? He's like, I've been paying attention. Don't think about this. Feel it. What's sacred to me that I would want everyone to have this feeling, this experience of the world without condition, right? No condition, because otherwise you start imposing certain dogmas and beliefs on people. No, it's without condition. And just write it. Write how it feels. And this is fun. Write it down 20 times. And when you keep writing it, you can. And all of a sudden you get to, like, I don't know, item 17. Doesn't have to be item 17. And you feel an emotional shift and you feel moved. And this conjures something up in you. You know, you might even get teary-eyed, as cheesy as that sounds. That's it. That's the point you want to get to, because that's what's real. That's your body telling you, this is visceral, this is deep, this is you, this resonates. You know, you want to feel that it's right, not think it's right.
I said that is some heavy feeling. I'm going to feel on this, and I'm just going to journal on this, and we'll see what comes out. And I will, when I feel like I have something that resonates with me, I will gladly share it with the world. Maybe I'll share it with you first, just to ask if is this right or is this not right? Because, I have to always be right. No, I'm just kidding.
All I'll look at, is it unconditional, and is it succinct? Is there like a whole storyline in there? You'll know if it's right, not me, but.
That's true. That's true. Okay. So we've got a couple of minutes here, and I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everyone. Last question of the interview, and that's knowing where you are now in your life and your career. What advice would you give to yourself as, let's say, a professional just kind of starting out in the world? So knowing where you are now, what advice would you give to your younger self?
A couple of things. One, it doesn't mean anything. Whatever you think it means, it doesn't mean that. That's a meaning that you gave it, and you can give it another meaning. And because you are so limited in what you know versus what you're capable of knowing versus what's knowable, that meaning right or wrong is an erroneous question. The question is that meaning useful or not useful? Is that constructive or destructive? Number two, if you try to get approval, it is dishonest, and never put yourself in a situation where you are trying to gain the approval of people to whom you matter the least, and in doing so, rob the contribution from people who need it the most. That is one of the biggest mistakes I made, is surrounding myself with teams all the time and trying to build a surrogate family that I thought I never had. And while some of those people, it's just, you meet some people and it is there. Again, it's none of your business. It's none of your business who gets this, who gets you. It's none of my business who gets me. All you can do is show up and put forth the work. And I don't mean the effort, and I mean put forth your thing with an open mind, open heart, open will. And what will occur will occur. It's out of your hands at that point. So first is, it means nothing. Number two, don't seek approval. That is a losing game. In seeking approval, you actually wind up losing approval from everyone. But what you wind up losing that's even bigger is that true contribution with people who resonate with you, who need you, the authentic you. There's no one like you who's ever been born. There's no one like you who's coming after you. This is it. Either you bring this from in here to out there in the world, or the world's never going to have it. Don't waste time with frivolous, meaningless things like approval. There's no time.
Beautiful advice, and something that I know I certainly have struggled with in the past. And like I said earlier, I mean, we're only human, right? So that's there. But I love your take on it of don't be wishing for this approval from all these people who could give two shits about you, when the people who matter the most are the people that you don't have to be seeking their approval from 24/7, because you're there. They know you, they appreciate you, they see you. You don't have to be so desperate for all of that approval and attention from the people who know you, because you have it.
Yeah. There's one more thing I would tell myself, and I would tell everyone. And my friend Ryan always says, #there's nothing wrong with you. And I love that, and I use that because there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, people talk about authenticity. Well, the first rule of authenticity is be authentic about your inauthenticity. You said it, Karen. We're all human. We're all dysfunctional. We're all imperfect. Rather than fight it or be ashamed of it or apologize for it, embrace it, because it's some of the most imperfect, dysfunctional people that have the most monumental weaknesses that also exhibit very unique strengths. And, you know, I mean, if your weaknesses are, you know, they hurt people around you, yeah, get that shit sorted. That's not cool. But if your weaknesses are just, you're so dysfunctional, you might be a mess in this area, and you spend your whole life trying to work on where you're weak and pull yourself up and drag yourself kicking and screaming, where you're going to wind up eventually, because your weaknesses, like your strengths, they're a result of what has happened to you, but they're also innate within you. You're going to drag yourself to average. And that's where you're going to stop. Let it go. Way better is to take your unique talents and strengths and potentialities that ensue from that and develop those. And I believe the only way you can really develop that is not by using them, but also contributing them to where other people benefit as well. It's that interaction. It's that interpersonal dynamic and energetic exchange where our talents are really forged and accelerated. You're not going to wind up as average. You're going to be on the far side of extraordinary, because everyone has that area. So, you know, you could focus and apologize on your weaknesses and hate yourself for them. You say, fuck them, that's just me. And just focus on your strengths, because that's where contribution lies. And when you contribute enough, it's not what you get in the end or what you're given. It's who you become in the process. And the payoff is built into that process, because you get to play in an arena which you were engineered for. That's joy. You know, maybe it's not about what we get. Maybe it's about, wow, how do I give a little joy and experience joy, you know, in the very short time we're here.
Yeah. And I also think that when you realize what your strengths are, it's your responsibility to share those strengths with other people, because they might not be their strengths, but they may be able to pick up from you and build themselves up as a result. And so it's your responsibility to share what your strengths are, because otherwise you can look at it as you're being kind of selfish and not maybe presenting and helping others the way that maybe you can. And maybe selfish is the wrong word, but it applies
to some people. Some people are very selfish, right? And, you know, there's two types of selfish people. One who doesn't acknowledge it and they go on being selfish. The other type of person who acknowledges it and then can take steps to be not selfish. But I think more often than not, it's not selfishness. It's someone who's self-centered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're very different. And that's not a bad person I'm talking about. You know, there's a lot of reasons why you're self-centered. Fear can make you self-centered. You know, pain, suffering in your past can make you self-centered, because self-centered could be self-protected.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with the word responsibility, again, well, I'm all about semantics. What does that word mean? It seems like this big burden. Responsibility is not burdensome. Mm-mm. It's liberating.
Yeah, totally. You know, yeah, for sure.
You had asked me, I think it was on a text, like talking about, well, what are some takeaways for people with trauma? I know we didn't really talk a lot about trauma, which is cool. But, you know, one of the ways I think to deal with trauma, and I'm not saying this as an expert, I'm saying it as someone who has been through a lot of it and deeply immersed in it, it's understanding what the meaning of responsibility is. And it's not fault, it's not blame, it's not a burden. You know, nothing that, you know, people go, oh, well, everything that happens is your fault. That's one school of self-help. The other school is nothing that happens to you is your fault. I think both of those are ridiculous. It's somewhere in the middle. But a lot of times when we're victims, even though we like should all over ourselves about it, like, oh, I shouldn't have been in that situation, or I should have known better. No, very empathetic and smart, intelligent people who trust themselves, they become victimized because they're very good at rationalizing why they're in that situation. So probably it was not your fault at all, not even a little bit, but it's all our responsibility. You know, so me being, you know, abused, whether it's physically or sexually, when I was a kid, not my fault, that's my responsibility. Because now as an adult, how do I reconcile that? You know, how do I accept the pieces that are damaged, that may not heal, and where can I heal? And what's my process to take something that might have been out of my control, might not have been my fault, and utilize it in a way that's constructive for a meaning that is personally significant, that I choose. I think when you accept responsibility, you liberate yourself. You know, it's a breakthrough because it's also a break with. Responsibility looks forward rather than back.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a great way to think about responsibility. And I also think it's a great way to end our conversation here. But before we do that, where can people find more information about you?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm on www.robertcappuccio.com. That's 2 C's and 2 P's. It's kind of like cappuccino without an N.com. I'm on Facebook. I hate saying this, but I get a lot of friend requests every day that I cannot get back to them because I'm usually at my limit. So don't friend request me. Go to my page and follow me. I don't say that a lot, and I get all these requests. I'm like, oh God, I'm so rude, God. And I'm on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not great at social media, but I do post.
No, you're very good in social media.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I try to share a lot, but it's like anyway. So, but yeah, I'm always putting my thoughts out there. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're just weird, but you know, go with the flow.
Helpful weird thoughts are always good in my book. And if you want more of the things that Bobby talked about today, then definitely follow him on Instagram and follow him on Facebook, because he makes some really beautiful short videos that I think are well worth the watch. So Bobby, thank you so much. Next time you're in New York, we will go for a pint and play some trivia again.
Not on trivia night. No way am I going.
We'll do it again. And next time, where you're in California, right?
Well, I'm in California.
Yeah. Yeah. So next time I come out to California, which might be in March, by the way, I will let you know.
Cool. Looking forward to seeing you.
Awesome. And everybody, thanks so much for listening. I know that everyone got a lot out of this conversation, lots to think about. And I look forward to seeing everyone's originating intentions soon. So maybe we'll start a thread and try and get people's originating intentions. So Bobby, thanks so much for taking the time out. Yes. And everybody, thanks so much for listening. Have a great day and stay healthy.